Hello, it's Rhino time again. I am going to show you some new neat tricks, things you can do with the software. I am picking up with the same document I was using before, and I'm going to show you first a tool that's very similar to the trim tool, but instead it's called split. And actually, if you look over here on the side, I've got to find it. Yeah, right here is, I hover over that, that's the trim tool. Then right over here, that's the split tool. So they look pretty similar. Now the way the split tool works, and I'm going to select it, is it tells me to select my cutting objects. And I'm going to, whoop, I got to back up because I'm going to go escape, and I'm going to deselect that line, and then I'm going to open up the split command again, and now I can select the object to split. So the moral of that story is that sometimes when you begin a move, if you already have something selected, it's going to affect the sequence. Sometimes it's fine, sometimes it doesn't quite work. So now I'm going to select the objects that I'm going to split, and I'm going to select this other object right there. And I'm going to press enter or return when I'm done. So now when I go, you remember with the trimming command, when I selected that part of the curve above the line that I was splitting with, it disappeared. With split, what it does is it keeps your two objects there. I've got to get out of the tool again. And now if I select that tool, split didn't work. So why didn't it work? Let's try this again so I don't have to start this whole tutorial again. Again, I'm going to select the split command. I'm going to select the object to split, which is this object right here. Press enter. Then I'm going to select my cutting object and press enter. Now, when I select that side, it's split. That side, it's split, so they're separate pieces. I'm not quite sure why it didn't work the first time, but that happens all the time when you're working with Rhino. You think you do something right, and it turns out you did one step wrong. And the best rule of thumb is just to don't panic, just kind of go backwards, Command Z or whatever, and try it again. So what the split does is it gives me these two different objects that are separated. Now there's another move that you can make to divide segments of a curve, and that is called the explode tool. So now if I go over here and I select, it's this little, kind of looks like a little portion of an explosion. I'm going to select that. That's going to tell me select the object that I'm going to explode. I'm going to select that section of the curve and press enter. Now when I go back to this and I select parts of it, it means that it's divided it up into different sections. So this exploded this into two different pieces. I'm going to try and explode this again. I'll select the object and then I'm going to press the explode command. And it says down here that it cannot explode a single curve segment. So this curve right here is divided up into one line, so it can't be divided up, which makes sense. So now if I come back here and I'm going to bring this line back up, and I'll do the split up higher, I'm going to select the split command, and then I'm going to select that object to split, press return, and now I select my cutting object and press return. Now if I come here, it has actually divided up into smaller segments. Okay, so now another thing to remember is when you explode things, as long as you don't move them, you can put them back together again. Now I can go and I can do the marquee, and remember when I drag the marquee across my object, anything that it touches, it will activate. And now if I go back here and I press the join command and select off, you can see it's brought it back to be one whole piece. So now if I were to take this object and I were to move it a little bit, like so, and I've moved enough here so you can see the space between, but sometimes you can just move it a teeny little bit when you come back to select it and I try and join it. It's going to say unable to join curves because they're just, the points are too far apart. Now, let's say I want to join these curves and I don't really feel like putting them back where they were. There's a solution to this where I can select this object and I can drag this endpoint and bring it over to here and see where you see the end, let it go, and now those 2 points are right on top of each other or in the same virtual space. I'm going to do the same thing here, and I'm going to see where it says end and let that go. Now if I select them both and I join them, then they are joined together. A little bit of a bump in the shape, but you can mend things back together again, and sometimes you need to do that by just moving points around. So, and I'll go more into that a little bit later. Okay, so now the next thing I'm going to show you is the snaps. And I was using the O snaps a minute ago. I didn't really explain what they were doing. Before I go to the O snaps, I'm going to go up and I'm going to show you the grid snaps. Now, if I click up here, remember with the little words with pills, and grid snap, and I make that gray, that means the grid snap is operating. So what that does is that means that the objects I'm working with, the points are going to snap to the grid, and you see the grid in the background here. This grid is, presumably I can see down in the lower right that I'm in inches. So the grid is in inches, and I believe they're divided into quarter inches. It varies depending on whether you're working in inches or feet or metric. Now if I'm going to go here and I'm going to start drawing a line, and you look and you'll see how the point is jumping to the spaces in the grid. So what that does is that directs the beginning of my line to a point on the grid. Now the next space that I click on, it's pointing to a grid, and the next space is pointing to a grid. So I'm completely limited to where I can put my points basically to them lining up on the grid. And sometimes it's very, very useful. Sometimes it's incredibly annoying. So let's say I wanted to do this freeform shape here, and I don't want to be have things dictated by the grid anymore. So while I'm still in the move, I can go up here and I can click that grid snap off, and now I can make my point anywhere I want to. Now another reason that, or another way that the grid snap works, it just has to do with moving objects. So if I select this object and I move it, no grid snap selected, so it moves very smoothly wherever I want it to go. If I turn the grid snap on, now the object is going to jump to the points on the grid snap. So it's can control where it can go. And this can be really a useful tool. Remember I showed you the last tutorial about the copying using the Alt key. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make a copy, hold down the Option key, and I'm going to drag. And you can see how it snaps to the grid. I'm going to make another copy, and it snaps to the grid. I'm going to make another copy, and it snaps to the grid. This isn't the best example in the world, but you can see how I can make a very regular pattern with objects by using the grid snap. So again, the grid snap is up in this left-hand corner. You turn it on, you turn it off. You can turn it on and off while you're making one particular move. Really, if you wanted to, and you were drawing a really complicated line, you could turn it on and off as many times as you could think of. Now that's the grid snaps. The things that are called O snaps also do work with points and directing things to each other, but it's kind of a different concept. and then it has more to do with the object relating to another object than it does with the actual grid. So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to draw a line right here, control point curve, and then I'm going to draw a straight line with the polyline, and then I'm going to draw a circle. Okay, so I'm going to turn off gridsnap. This is not really relevant right now, but you can have the gridsnap on and you can use O-snaps also. So over here are where I control the O-snaps. And this bottom checkbox lets me turn them off completely. So if I click on that, then the O-snaps aren't operating, and there's definitely times when you want them off. So just remembering that you can, when sometimes something weird is happening and an object is going where you don't want it to go, and that could be there's an O-snap that's overriding what you're trying to do. That would be an example of when to turn it off. So I'm going to turn them back on again. And I am going to turn off the intersection, and I'm going to turn on near. So when I go to move something, a point in particular, turn this, select that object, and I'm going to grab that particular point I'm going to highlight, so I'm moving that point. Now when I drag it around, I can put it on top of another line, and I might think that it's connected, but you don't really know it's connected unless when you snap to something, then it's absolutely positively connected. Now, it should be connecting to the point. I'm not sure why it's not. Let's try moving the entire object. This is something that is going on with Rhino6. It's a little bit different, so I'm going to stop the tutorial right here, and I'm going to figure out why what I'm trying to show you isn't working, and then I'm going to come back and pick it up and do more work with the O-snaps. So in the meantime, practice some splitting and see what happens when you draw lines with the grid snap. Turn the grid snap on and off, and play around with the tools from the last tutorials a little bit, and I will be back before you know it.